Dust Creek sat under the weight of its own dust, a town worn to the bone by heat, whiskey, and forgotten dreams. The wind dragged across its single dirt road, like an old drunk muttering to himself, carrying with it the smell of gun oil and sweat. The saloon stood at the center, its warped sign swinging weakly, creaking in protest of another endless afternoon. Inside, laughter cracked through the haze of cigar smoke. Glasses clinked. A piano stumbled over a broken tune, and men drank away whatever life hadn't yet taken from them. When the door swung open, the piano stopped. A figure stood against the white glare of the sun, framed like a shadow cut from the light itself. He stepped in slow, dust sliding off his coat in soft cascades. His boots made no sound on the warped boards, as if even they respected his silence. He wasn't tall in the way of giants, but in the way of men who'd seen too much and carried it all inside. His eyes were pale gray, cold, steady, the color of river stone buried deep in winter streams. He didn't look like a killer, not at first. There was no badge, no shine to his belt, no swagger. Just a hat pulled low, a jaw set in quiet steel, and a revolver that looked like it hadn't been drawn in years, but was cleaned like a prayer. He took a seat at the far end of the bar. "Whiskey?" asked Sam, the barkeep, polishing a glass more out of habit than hope. "Coffee," the stranger said, voice low and rough, like gravel under boots. That got attention. A few heads turned. A man asking for coffee in Dust Creek was like a priest preaching in a gambling den, out of place and asking for trouble. Laughter broke out from a table near the window. "Coffee," one of them drawled, grinning through yellowed teeth. "We got ourselves a preacher, boys. Lord save us. The righteous done come to drink with sinners." Another spat tobacco into a corner, more like a ghost. "Look at him, all quiet and pale like death forgot to take him." The stranger didn't flinch. He wrapped his fingers around the cup Sam slid over, steam rising between them. Sam leaned closer. "You best not mind him. Clay Redden's boys, they run this town like wolves run sheep. Keep your head down and finish that coffee." The stranger nodded once, slow. "Ain't looking for trouble." The door opened again, and trouble walked in. Clay Redden led his gang like a pack of hyenas, loud and proud, with the stink of arrogance and whiskey announcing them before their boots hit the floorboards. He wore a long duster coat, a scar twisting his mouth into something that looked like a grin but wasn't. His eyes were mean, born from too many easy victories and too few men brave enough to stand against him. "Well, I'll be damned," Clay said, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Who let the undertaker out this early?" His men chuckled behind him. "Ain't polite to sit in my saloon without saying howdy." The stranger didn't turn. He took another sip of his coffee, his hand steady. "Didn't see your name on the door." A hush fell. Sam froze behind the counter. The piano player's fingers hovered mid-note, and someone in the corner muttered a prayer. Clay's grin sharpened. "Well, now, I like a man with a mouth," Clay said. "But you gotta earn that kind of talk in Dust Creek. So what's it gonna be, preacher? You gonna bless us, or you gonna buy the next round?" The stranger said nothing. He set his cup down gently. Clay's voice dropped low. "You deaf, stranger?" "Just done talking." The words were quiet, but cut through the room like a knife. The laughter stopped. Clay's hand twitched near his gun. His men leaned back, hungry for a show. "Done talking," Clay mocked, feigning hurt. "That's so. Well, I ain't done with you." He took a step forward, slow, deliberate. "Let me teach you some manners." Sam whispered, "Don't." But Clay had already reached for the stranger's cup, grabbed it, and smashed it to the floor. Hot coffee splattered across the boards. The stranger's eyes lifted. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Clay's voice broke the stillness. "How about you draw a ghost? Show me that steady hand you're so proud of." The next moment happened faster than thought. The stranger's hand flickered, not a draw, not a reach, just motion, clean and perfect. A single crack split the air, loud as thunder in that small room. Clay's hat flew off his head, a bullet hole clean through the crown. The smell of gunpowder rolled through the silence. Clay froze. A tremor passed through him as he realized his scalp was untouched. The The stranger's Colt rested back in its holster before anyone had blinked. For a long second, the only sound was the ticking of the ceiling fan. Then the stranger dropped a silver coin onto the counter. The sound of it ringing was louder than the shot. "No man should die for words," he said softly, his voice calm as still water. He turned and walked toward the door. No one breathed. Even the wind seemed to wait. He stepped outside, the heat swallowing him, the sun painting his outline in gold before the door swung shut behind him. Inside, the saloon stayed frozen. Sam let out a long, shaking breath. The piano player swallowed hard and started to play again, slow, uncertain notes trembling through the smoke. Clay stood there, pale beneath his tan, eyes wide, hands still hovering over his gun. "Boss," one of his men whispered, "you gonna let him walk?" Clay's jaw clenched. He picked up his hat, stared at the hole in it, and slammed it against the bar. "Find out who he is," he growled. "Ain't no man walks into my town and makes a fool of me." But Sam already knew better. He'd seen that kind of stillness once before, in soldiers who'd killed enough to lose their taste for it. He leaned on the counter, eyes on the door where the stranger had vanished. "Best leave him be," Sam said quietly. "Ain't a man alive fast enough to walk away from what's in his eyes." The men laughed nervously, trying to shake off the chill that hung in the air, but none of them went after the stranger. Not yet. Outside, the light was fading, turning Dust Creek into long shadows and gold dust. The stranger walked toward the edge of town, boots crunching softly in the silence. Behind him, voices rose again, whispers, guesses, old names half remembered from darker days. "Who was he?" someone asked. Sam's voice came from the doorway, low and weary. "Don't know, but if I had to guess, a man trying hard to forget what he used to be." The stranger didn't look back. The wind tugged at his coat, carrying away the echo of gunfire and laughter, leaving behind only questions. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the sky burned crimson, and the road stretched out, long, empty, waiting. And Dust Creek, for the first time in years, felt small under the eyes of a man who had once stared down death and didn't blink. Night clung to Dust Creek like a bad memory. The moon was a dull coin behind thin clouds, and the town slept uneasy, its silence broken now and then by a hoarse snort, a bottle rolling off a porch, or the groan of a swinging saloon sign. Inside that saloon, Clay Redden's gang sat heavy around their table, nursing whiskey and humiliation in equal measure. Clay's hat, with the clean bullet hole through its crown, hung on a nail above them like a trophy of shame. Clay stared at it, jaw working, knuckles white around his glass. "He made a fool of me," he said, voice low, almost to himself, in front of everyone. Harlan, the youngest of the crew, laughed nervously. "He's long gone by now, boss. Ain't no reason." The glass hit the wall and shattered. "You shut your damn mouth." Clay stood, the lamplight cutting hard against the scar on his face. "At dawn we ride. I want that bastard's head before the sun's high enough to show his shadow." The others murmured their assent, some out of fear, some out of loyalty, and most out of habit. The gang had killed for less. But deep down, none of them liked how that man had stood there, still, quiet, untouchable, like death in no hurry. Across the room, Mara poured drinks for two drifters too drunk to notice her silence. Her hands trembled only when she thought no one was looking. She had seen Clay angry before, but never humiliated, and that meant something worse was coming. She set the tray down and leaned against the counter beside Sam, who was wiping the same glass he'd been polishing for an hour. "You seen that man before?" she asked. Sam shook his head. "No, but I seen eyes like that once." "When?" "In the war," he said softly. "There was a man they called the Ghost of Shiloh. Didn't talk much neither. Folks said he could hit a man's heart from a quarter-mile off and never blink. Killed for the Union, but when they told him to shoot a boy who was surrendering, he laid his rifle down and walked away. Never heard from him again." Mara frowned. "You think that's him?" Sam met her gaze. "I don't know, but I know this. Men who move like that ain't born from peace." Outside town, the stranger, Eli, sat beneath a dying oak, its branches clawing at the sky. A small fire flickered before him, more for company than warmth. Beside it lay a weathered headstone, the letters worn by wind and time. Eli Ward, husband and father. He brushed the dirt from the stone, his gloved hand trembling slightly. Then he pulled the glove off, revealing a hand scarred and stiff, fingers that had long ago forgotten what mercy felt like. He flexed it, pain biting through memory. The night air carried echoes, screams, gunfire, smoke from another time. He saw himself lying belly down on a ridge, rifle steady, watching blue and gray uniforms clash below. They had called him a hero back then, a ghost with a rifle who never missed. But one shot had ended all that. A surrendering boy, hands raised, a general's order echoing behind him. He had lowered the rifle, walked away, and buried the name Eli Ward under this very tree. He reached for his Colt. The metal felt heavy with history. He oiled the barrel, checked each chamber, moved with precision that was almost prayer. The revolver gleamed faintly in the firelight, an old companion, too loyal to forget. Beyond the ridge, the lights of Dust Creek flickered like a promise he wished he hadn't heard. He watched them a long time, his expression unreadable. The town was rotting under men like Clay Redden. But Eli hadn't come for vengeance. Not this time. He'd come because running had stopped working. The horizon was turning gray when he heard the soft crunch of boots. He didn't move his hand to the gun, just waited. Mara stepped from the brush, a tin cup in one hand, steam rising from it. "Brought you coffee," she said. Eli looked up. "Ain't safe walking out here this early." "Safe don't live in Dust Creek," she said simply, setting the cup near his fire. "You left quick last night. Clay won't let that stand." He studied her face, a young woman worn older by fear, eyes tired but defiant. She had seen too much cruelty to be afraid of ghosts. "You staying out here alone?" she asked. "Only place left that don't belong to him," Eli replied. Mara's gaze fell to the grave. "Was that your kin?" Eli hesitated, then nodded once. "Long time ago. They're gone." She sat on a fallen log, rubbing her hands against the morning chill. "Town's been dying since Clay took it. Sheriff ran off after they burned his place. Preacher, too. They hung him in front of the church. Folks stopped believing in anything after that." Eli's jaw tightened. "And you? You still believe?" She gave a hollow smile. "In mornings. They still come, even when nothing else does." For a while, neither spoke. The fire cracked softly, wind stirring through dry grass. Mara finally stood, brushing the dust from her skirt. "They'll come for you at dawn," she said. 15 men, maybe more. Clay's got something to prove." Eli didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the horizon, where the sun was bleeding gold into the clouds. She lingered. "Why'd you spare him?" He looked at her then, the faintest ghost of sorrow in his eyes. "No man should die for words. But he will kill you for them." Eli turned back to the fire. "Some ghosts come back for peace. Some for penance." Mara stared at him, unsure which one he was. Then she left the cup beside him and walked back toward the town, her figure fading with the rising sun. By the time she reached the saloon, Clay's men were already gathering. Horses snorted, rifles glinted, and whiskey passed from hand to hand like courage in a bottle. Clay stood at the front, hat pulled low to hide the hole he hadn't dared patch. His scar caught the morning light as he spoke. "We ride till we find him," he growled. "I want his eyes before I take his breath." Harlan swallowed hard. "Boss, what if he's—" "Shut it. Ain't no ghost. He bleeds same as any man. And by sundown I'll prove it." They saddled up, dust rising behind them in a red cloud. The sound of hooves rolled through the valley, a storm of vengeance on the wind. Up on the ridge, Eli watched them come, a dark line against the gold of morning. He holstered his revolver, cinched the strap on his pack, and rose slowly. His shadow stretched long over the grave. He looked down at the name carved in stone, then whispered something the wind took away. He turned toward the town. Behind him, the fire died out, leaving only a wisp of smoke curling toward the pale sky, thin as memory. By noon, the air above Dust Creek shimmered like glass. Heat crawled down the walls, twisting shadows. turning the town into a mirage of dust and silence. Folks stayed behind windows and shutters, hearts beating quick as rabbits. They'd seen gun smoke before, but something different rode on the wind that day. Something heavy, final. The first sound came from the horizon, hooves, rolling slow and steady like thunder before a storm. Clay Redden's riders were coming. 15 of them, sun gleaming off rifle barrels, faces smeared with grit and mean grins. They rode down Main Street as if they owned it, kicking up a red cloud that swallowed the road. The saloon doors swung open and slammed back, the sound cracking through the stillness. Inside, Mara stood behind the counter, her knuckles white around the edge of a glass she wasn't drinking from. Old Sam tried to keep his hand steady as he lined bottles on the shelf, though the tremor in them betrayed the fear neither dared speak. "Stay low," he whispered. "I'm done hiding," she answered softly. Outside, Clay dismounted. His boots struck the dirt like nails hitting wood. He looked around, scanning porches and windows, his voice carrying across the square. "Where's your ghost, Sam? Where's that quiet preacher who thinks he's faster than God?" No one answered, only the creak of a sign swinging in the heat. Then, from the far end of the street, a single figure stepped into view. The light behind him turned his outline to gold. Broad shoulders, long coat, hat brim low. The wind caught the edge of his duster, lifting it just enough to reveal the cold gleaming at his hip. He walked slow, unhurried, each step sinking into the dust like the weight of something inevitable. Clay laughed, sharp and mocking. "Thought you'd left, preacher. Guess you came to pray over your grave." The stranger's voice carried calm and cold. "You made graves enough here, Clay. I'll make the last one." The gang tensed. Clay sneered, spitting into the dirt. "Kill him." The first shot shattered a window. Then the world erupted. Gunfire tore through the quiet, like lightning splitting a storm. Horses screamed. Glass exploded. The air filled with smoke, dust, and the metallic scent of death. Men shouted, ducked, fired blind. But through it all, the stranger moved like the wind. No wasted steps, no panic, only precision. He drew, fired, and reloaded with the rhythm of memory. Each shot was deliberate, each bullet finding its mark. A man fell from his horse, clutching his throat. Another spun backward, his rifle clattering from lifeless hands. The legend of the ghost of Shiloh came alive again in the heart of Dust Creek. People watching from the windows saw not a man, but a force cold, relentless, unstoppable. Smoke drifted through the sunlight, like a funeral veil, as one outlaw after another hit the ground. Sam ducked behind the bar, shaking, whispering prayers that tangled with the sound of gunfire. Mara stood frozen by the window, watching that lone figure fight like time itself had been waiting for this hour. Clay's men broke. Those still breathing turned their horses and fled, vanishing down the road in a whirl of dust. Clay cursed after them, then fired wildly at the stranger, missing every shot. "Come on, preacher," he screamed. "Let's see if your God bleeds." The stranger's next bullet ripped the revolver clean out of Clay's hand. It hit the ground, spinning, smoking. Clay stumbled back, desperate, eyes wide with something that wasn't rage anymore. It was recognition. He grabbed Mara from the doorway, jerking her close, his arm locked around her throat. "You take one more step and she dies." The town went still again. Eli didn't move. The smoke curled around him like mist. Blood darkened his sleeve where a bullet had grazed his shoulder, but he stood straight, eyes locked on Clay. "Let her go," he said quietly. Clay backed toward the church, dragging Mara with him. The door hung crooked, half torn from its hinges. The steeple bell swayed in the wind, moaning low. He shoved her through the door, pistol to her head. Eli followed, slow, silent. The light through the broken stained glass painted the floor in shards of red and gold. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy. Clay's laughter echoed off the walls, half-crazed. "You ain't no preacher. You're a damn devil." Eli stepped into the light. His face was pale, streaked with sweat and dust. "No devil," he said. "Just a man who remembers." Clay's voice cracked. "Who the hell are you?" For a long moment, Eli said nothing. Then softly, "Name's Eli Ward. You burned my ranch years ago." You left my wife and boy in the fire." Clay's mouth fell open. He stumbled back a step, disbelief twisting his face. "No, they were dead." Eli finished for him. "You made sure of that." Recognition hit Clay like a bullet. The grave under the oak. The man he'd thought burned alive. His hands shook, his weapon slipping. "You're supposed to be dead," he hissed. "I was," Eli said, "until I heard your name again." The two men stared across the ruined church, sunlight burning between them, the bell above groaning in the wind like a tired soul. Then Clay lunged. The pistol roared. The bullet tore through Eli's shoulder, spinning him halfway. But even wounded, his movement was sure. He raised his Colt, one-handed, steady as ever. One shot. Clay's body jerked once, eyes wide in shock. He fell backward into the dust beneath the cross, his blood pooling in the cracks of the floorboards. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, distant but heavy, as though the heavens themselves had exhaled. Eli stood there a moment, breathing hard, the gun trembling in his hand. Then it fell from his grip. His knees buckled. Mara broke free and ran to him, catching him before he hit the ground. "Eli," she cried, pressing her hands against the blood blooming through his coat. "Stay with me, please." He looked up at her, eyes calm now, the storm gone from them. "It's done," he whispered. "Dust Creek's free." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "You can't die like this. Not after." He smiled faintly. "I already did." The bell above swung one last time, its tone deep and mournful, echoing down the empty street. The storm broke over the hills, rain starting to fall in slow, heavy drops, turning dust into dark earth. Mara held him close as the thunder faded. He reached for her hand, weakly pressing it against his chest. "Tell them." His voice was fading. "Tell them no man should die for words." Then his eyes drifted shut. Outside, the rain washed the blood from the church steps, leaving only ripples in the mud. The people of Dust Creek crept out at last, moving slow, reverent, as if afraid to disturb the quiet. Old Sim crossed himself when he saw Clay lying beneath the cross and Eli beside him. "God help us," he murmured. The ghost finally found peace. Mara stayed kneeling long after the others had gone, the storm easing to a drizzle, the smell of rain and smoke mingling in the air. She looked down at Eli's still face, then at the Colt beside him, and whispered, "Rest now. The West remembers." The sun broke through the clouds, a single beam spilling through the broken glass, falling across Eli's body and the cross above it. For the first time in years, Dust Creek was quiet, not with fear, but with peace. Morning came quiet to Dust Creek, the kind of quiet that feels earned, heavy, complete, like the land itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Smoke still clung to the air, faint and bitter from yesterday's gunfire, but the wind carried it away little by little, taking with it the last scent of death. The town had not known such stillness in years. The streets were empty except for the bodies already laid to rest, mounds of dirt freshly turned behind the church where the grass refused to grow. Someone had placed crosses, crooked but sincere, over the graves. No one said prayers. No one needed to. The West had its own way of remembering. Mara stood outside the saloon, her apron tied loose, her hair undone. She watched the sun climb over the ridge, the light spilling across the rooftops and catching on the empty windows. It touched everything, the broken sign, the bullet holes in the shutters, the blood still dark on the steps of the church. She didn't flinch. Dust Creek had survived worse, but never like this. Inside, the saloon was different. The air smelled of soap and coffee instead of whiskey and sweat. The tables were scrubbed, the floor swept. Only one thing remained untouched, a single chair by the window, facing the street, where the stranger had once sat. She kept it that way. Every morning she brewed 2 cups, set one there, and left it untouched until the sun dipped low enough to take it away. Sam came in from the back, limping as he carried a sack of beans. His hair had gone whiter since the fight, but his eyes still held that quiet glint of respect. "Never thought I'd live to see this place clean," he muttered, setting the sack down. Mara smiled faintly. "Maybe now I can breathe again." He poured himself a coffee, sat at the counter, and stared at the empty chair. He didn't look like much, Sam said softly. Just a man passing through. But when the smoke cleared, it felt like the whole damn West had shifted. Mara leaned against the bar, watching the morning drift by outside. He didn't want to be a hero, she said. Didn't even want to stay. Sam nodded. Heroes don't. They come to fix what's broken, then move on before the dust settles. He took a sip, grimaced. Coffee's still too strong. She laughed, a real laugh, the first since the shooting. It sounded strange, echoing against the clean walls. For a moment, Dust Creek felt alive again. Days turned into weeks. The sheriff rode back into town, hat in hand, shame on his face. He found the graves behind the church, and the quiet saloon that now served coffee and bread instead of gin and grief. Mara told him the short version. There'd been a fight. The Redding gang was gone. The town was safe. She said nothing about the man who'd done it. Some stories didn't belong in reports. Word spread anyway. Travelers passing through heard the whispers of a man who'd walked alone into a town of outlaws and cleaned it like a storm. They said he never missed, never spoke, and vanished with the dawn. Some called him the ghost of Dust Creek. Others swore it was the ghost of Shiloh come back from the war to finish what he'd started. Every version was different. In one, he rode off bleeding into the hills. In another, he lay buried under the oak, his revolver resting on his grave. Some said Mara saw him one last time, kneeling beside that weathered stone, head bowed, whispering to someone only he could hear before disappearing into the morning mist. No one knew for sure. The legend grew. Cowboys told it around campfires. Drifters carried it from saloon to saloon. Even the sheriff repeated it sometimes, though he left out how the town had cowered behind curtains, while one man faced 15. Truth had a way of shrinking in the retelling, but legends only grew. At dusk, Mara would walk out past the ridge to the dying oak where the grave stood. The grass there was taller now, soft and yellow, swaying with the wind. She'd sit beside the mound and brush away the dust that always settled on the stone. She never said his name aloud. It belonged to the past, to a time when he'd been husband, father, and soldier, before war and fire had stripped him bare. She'd bring fresh flowers when she could, and sometimes, when the light caught the ground just right, she swore she saw the glint of metal beneath the soil, the edge of a Colt revolver, half buried, catching the last gold of sunset. Old Sam would wait for her to return each evening, sitting on the saloon porch with his pipe. Folks passing by would stop for a drink or a story, and Sam always had one ready. "You ever hear of the man who walked into Dust Creek alone?" He'd begin, smoke curling around his words. Didn't come for gold, didn't come for fame, just came to balance the scales. The travelers would lean in, faces lit by lamplight. They mocked him once, Sam would say, eyes distant, and found out what the West calls death. The room would go quiet after that, the only sound the ticking of the clock and the wind slipping under the doors. Some of them asked for his name. Sam always gave the same answer. "Names don't matter out here," he'd say. "Only what a man leaves behind." One summer evening, long after the story had become more myth than memory, Mara stood again by the window, watching the sun die over the hills. The town was alive now. Children ran where guns once roared. Laughter replaced fear, and the church bell rang again for weddings instead of funerals. Dust Creek had finally learned peace. She lifted the untouched cup from the empty chair and smiled softly to herself. "Some men live quiet," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "So they don't hurt again. Some ride back so others can heal." Her eyes lingered on the horizon, where the red dust met the gold light. He wasn't a ghost, just a man who remembered what mercy cost. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it a thin trail of dust that danced in the last rays of light. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rumbled far away, not angry this time, just old, tired, and peaceful. The next morning, when Mara walked out to the oak, she found something she hadn't seen before. The grave was the same, the grass swaying, the stone untouched, but lying against it was a Colt revolver, weathered by rain, the steel dulled by time. Its handle was engraved faintly with initials half-faded by rust. She knelt beside it, fingertips tracing the cold metal. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she smiled through tears that didn't quite fall. The sun climbed, catching the barrel just right, and a flash of light swept across the hill, bright, clean, final. Mara stood and looked out toward the horizon. "Rest easy, Eli," she whispered. "The West remembers." And as the wind moved through the grass, soft and endless, it almost sounded like a man's voice carried on the air, calm, steady, unhurried, riding into legend.